And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, is this new liquid cleaner I bought unsafe for propagating fly larvae? And with the Omicron variant spreading widely, will new restrictions stop me from getting the local hot and heavy rave scene over to my house? And now, the podcast host who tempts fate and local scandal by driving an electric vehicle, Pete Dominic.
All right, and we are off. Hello and welcome to today's program. It is episode 497, just 3 more shows, and it's the big 500th. What have I got planned? Nothing really, except for playing your voicemail messages, folks. I introduced the new stand-up hotline on yesterday's show. It's 209-STAND-UP or 209-782-6387. If you're driving or your phone's in your pocket or whatever, that number is in the show notes. But I would love to have you leave like a minute-long voicemail message talking about why you love the show, and I'll play some of those messages, talk about your favorite moments, make fun of me, make it interesting, entertaining if you can, and I'll try to play them, maybe even use them for promotion of the show, because I'm going to be stepping up my game next year, looking to try to hire some people to work with, at least part-time, and maybe an intern. The show is going excellently. Welcome to new subscribers. I've got great new advertisers, which is going to allow me to hire people, and I'm really excited about what's to come. And I'm especially excited about today's program. I haven't even told you who's on unless you saw the promotion. It's Laura Coates of SiriusXM and CNN, and formerly of the Department of Justice. Brilliant commentator, one of my closest friends, love her. And also introducing today a young state senator that you are really going to want to know. Her name is Mallory McDowell. Last week, I played a 4-minute clip of her reacting to the shooting at the high school, which is right outside her district in Michigan. A lot of people were moved by that. And shout out to Carlo, the listener up in Canada, who actually emailed her before I even could to say you should do the show. I then invited her on, made it official. We talked over the weekend. Amazing conversation with both her and Laura Coates on today's show. Laura starts at 34 minutes in. And my great conversation with Senator Mallory McDowell begins at hour 13 minutes in. And today's show is brought to you by Quip Toothbrush, the Quip electric toothbrush. Get Quip.com/stand-up. Also excited to tell you that I've been made the offer and have accepted to be the audience warm-up comedian on the award-winning hit show, The Smartest, Funniest Show on TV, HBO's Last Week Tonight. One might argue, at least is, I think, probably won the most awards, either that or Colbert. And they all come from the same brainchild, which is that Daily Show theme. And, of course, I worked at the Daily Show and the Colbert Report for years as the audience warm-up comedian. And now I'm going to take that gig on Saturday nights in New York City at Last Week Tonight on HBO. I'm very excited to be a small part, to be playing a small role on that great, great show. But not making a big deal out of it. It's not the kind of thing you put a press release out about or that the show does. But it's a great gig, and it'll be great for my family. And if you're in New York City on a Saturday night and you want tickets to that show, no promises, but I'll definitely send you in the right direction. And before I get to the news of the world, I want to mention the news in my world, just a story that happened in my community. I like to keep you updated because I'm sure that you're dealing with similar experiences, and I'm always happy to talk about strategies and what's working in your town. But there continues to be a controversy and a split in my town and a lot of like suburban towns around America that have community Facebook pages, and that's where a lot of the action and arguments occur. People start posting things, claims, rumors, arguments, you name it, and agreements of any sort about anything, and people get divided very easily. And I've started to get engaged in what I'm trying to be thoughtful and not name-calling or disrespectful. I mean, these are my actual neighbors, people in my community, but I'm also using comedy whenever I can. And yesterday, a guy posted about they've been attacking my daughter's principal, who I really like and have heard nothing but good things about. I've met him and we've exchanged emails, and I think he's really great. The students seem to like him. And they've been attacking him for any number of things and the ridiculous things. But the most recent thing, this is true. It's hard to believe. But yesterday on my local Facebook page, a guy posted a picture of the principal's Mini Cooper electric car, plug-in car, plugged in. So while the principal goes into school, he plugs his car in. And the guy posted a picture of it, which looked like surreptitiously taken, like a little unsavory. Like, what are you doing? Who took that picture? Do you got a mole on campus taking pictures of teachers' cars? Anyway, and he complained that the principal was using some kind of special privilege of electricity to charge up his car. And who was paying for that, by the way? And if maybe you're open to that argument, but I, of course, thought it was awesome that the principal is leading by example and that he is a good role model. And I'm no more concerned about him using electricity than anybody else using electricity. And hopefully they'll put in a charging port at that in every other school in the country. But anyway, I never stopped thinking about it all day, that this was a thing that happened. And so I went on the Facebook tonight, and I've decided to start using more humor. And even though this is kind of mocking and biting the guy who originally posted it, I just went on and randomly posted the following. I wrote on my kids on our community Facebook page, I just found out my daughter's math teacher, and I named the school, she warmed up her cup of soup in a microwave at school. And she's done this almost every day this year. Total disgrace, all caps. This same teacher is apparently charging her phone and a laptop using the school power outlets. How much more of this madness can we take? Why can't these teachers bring electricity from home? I will be posting pictures I secretly had taken of the devices tomorrow, but stay tuned and please share this post far and wide. One of the guys that makes all these outrageous posts and has a lot of influence in town, who I've talked to a lot, but he always adds and tags his post with please share it far and wide. So now I'm going to do that too. Anyway, it's been quite a hit and I'm having fun with it. And it's just one way to approach, I think, it'll certainly bring levity, but also just point out how absurd of an argument that is. So let me know what's going on in your local town and community and Facebook pages and how you use them and what people are divided over and what you would do if you wanted. I mean, most people, I think, just don't say anything, or they're just kind of silently trolling the page and not adding likes or any reactions because they don't want to have anybody know what they think about anything. But I'm pretty public, and locally I haven't been so outspoken, but over the past couple of years, that has all changed, and I'm thinking of running for office. So all of this stuff keeps that in mind with my posts. I'm not looking to get in a fight with anybody or embarrass anybody, so I try not to name names and stuff or call names ever, but I am going to continue to tell people what I think about stuff in a thoughtful way, and doing that here on the program as well, right here on Stand Up, Monday through Friday. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please sign up right now, standupwithpete.com, and get yourself a subscription and join us in the community, which is growing, and I'm so excited about it and what's to come in the coming year. And also, don't forget to leave a message at 209 Stand Up, and I'll play them on Show 500 and whenever else. Any message you want, by the way. Just reach out and say hello. All right, now it's time to get to the news. It's time for the last 24. All right, lots to play for you from yesterday, the aftermath of the tornadoes in Kentucky. And then last night, news broke that the January 6th Congressional Committee would be charging Mark Meadows, President Trump's fourth chief of staff and final chief of staff, with contempt, criminal contempt, whatever that means. I've got some reactions to that, a whole bunch of audio from several things that happened yesterday, and let's get to it, shall we? First, just want to get some reaction from the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, who said yesterday it's going to take years to recover from what he said is the worst tornado outbreak in Kentucky's history. And this
estimate on deaths, and these are numbers coming from emergency management. They may differ a little bit from the coroner. There's one of these we're certainly checking on, is that we are now up to 74 Kentuckians that we have lost.
And that's the number I read when I started recording tonight. So I guess that's where it stands as of late on Monday night. And terrible news about that candle factory in Mayfield, Kentucky. Reports now, NBC News reporting that factory workers were threatened with firing if they left before the tornado. According to some employees, at least 8 people died in the Mayfield Consumer Products candle factory, and now its destruction has become a symbol of the tornado's ruinous power and the engine of capitalism as well, and sometimes how incentives get in the way, potentially, of human lives. I'm not going to rush to judgment here, but they were working 24/7 shifts because there's tremendous demand for candles this time of year. So I'll be closely following that story as well. Horrible, horrible story out of Kentucky. And I like to think they're going to do a full investigation on that reporting from NBC News to find out if that was in fact true. But I got to say, I think that definitely the top domestic political story, at least, maybe just top story overall in the U.S. last night was a story that broke last night around dinner time. The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol, the insurrection, unanimously passed a resolution to recommend that the Department of Justice hold former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in criminal contempt for defying a subpoena from Congress. The resolution now heads to a full House for a vote. Ultimately, the Department of Justice would have to decide whether to bring such charges. But according to a report by the committee, Mark Meadows is uniquely, quote, uniquely situated to provide key information, having straddled an official role in the White House and an unofficial role related to Mr. Trump's reelection campaign since at least Election Day in 2020 through January 6th. And of course, he's going on TV and doing interviews with his friends. So he's talking to them, but he won't answer questions in an investigation. Well, first he said he would cooperate. Then he said he wouldn't cooperate when Trump got mad when his book came out. And then he is now suing the committee. But ahead of the vote, the ranking member on the committee, Liz Cheney, mentioned that in the report, there were texts. There was a transcript where Fox News hosts were texting Mark Meadows as the riot was underway. And she quoted the reporter text messages, and the video and audio went absolutely viral. If you haven't heard it yet, it's worth hearing again, because I listened to it like 3 times and still couldn't believe it. Well, I guess I can believe it, but all of these people who texted these things are now trying to say something different and rewrite history. But listen, this is 4 minutes of Liz Cheney, and it's absolutely riveting. And I swear to God, I never thought I would say that statement about Liz Cheney.
For 187 minutes, President Trump refused to act. When action by our president was required, essential, and indeed compelled by his oath to our Constitution. Mr. Meadows received numerous text messages, which he has produced without any privilege claim, imploring that Mr. Trump take the specific action we all knew his duty required. These text messages leave no doubt the White House knew exactly what was happening here at the Capitol. Members of Congress, the press, and others wrote to Mark Meadows as the attack was underway. One text Mr. Meadows received said, quote, "We are under siege here at the Capitol." Another, quote, "They have breached the Capitol." In a third, "Mark, protesters are literally storming the Capitol, breaking windows on doors, rushing in. Is Trump going to say something?" A fourth, "There's an armed standoff at the House chamber door." And another from someone inside the Capitol, "We are all helpless." Dozens of texts, including from Trump administration officials, urged immediate action by the president. Quote, "POTUS has to come out firmly and tell the protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed." In another, "Mark, he needs to stop this now." A third, in all caps, "Tell them to go home." A fourth, and I quote, "POTUS needs to calm this shit down." Indeed, according to the records, multiple Fox News hosts knew the president needed to act immediately. They texted Mr. Meadows, and he has turned over those texts. Quote, "Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy, Laura Ingraham wrote. Please get him on TV. Destroying everything you have accomplished, Brian Kilmeade texted. Quote, can he make a statement? Ask people to leave the Capitol, Sean Hannity urged. As the violence continued, one of the president's sons texted Mr. Meadows, quote, he's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough, Donald Trump Jr. texted. Meadows responded, quote, I'm pushing it hard. I agree. Still, President Trump did not immediately act. Donald Trump Jr. texted again and again, urging action by the president. Quote, we need an Oval Office address. He has to lead now. It has gone too far and gotten out of hand, end quote. But hours passed without necessary action by the president.
There you go, Liz Cheney, and that's where the crime seems to be committed, that the president did nothing while there was a crime underway. Imagine if Al-Qaeda was attacking the Capitol and President Trump just watched it on TV and gave no orders other than basically stand down. I think that's one of the big concerns. Although it does seem to raise a lot of questions about whether there was any plotting or planning, or John Jr. or Mark Meadows were in on it, because based on those text messages, it sounds like they were surprised and wanted it to stop. So I have more questions about the whole plotting and planning ahead of time. I mean, the crimes are being in contempt of Congress and not showing up to answer questions. But if you didn't commit any crimes, why not answer questions? Okay, well, here is the rest of the committee. Just a quick montage of commentary from the rest of the congressmen on this, I think, 12-person or is it 10-person committee, the January 6th committee.
In events that culminated in the violent attack on the Capitol and on our democracy.
Mark Meadows has committed a crime, in this case, a premeditated one. No one is above the law, not even a former president's chief of staff.
And I expect the Justice Department to move as swiftly in dealing with Mr. Meadows as it did with Mr. Bannon, and prosecute him for violating the law and his duty as a citizen.
The Select Committee has a lot of questions about what the president said and did on January 6th. We have a lot of questions about the protests that day and how they escalated into a riot. And Mark Meadows says he can't discuss those details with us, but apparently he can put them in his book.
Mr. Meadows was a central participant in the events that culminated in this assault on our Capitol, our country, and our core democratic values.
This witness must testify, like 300 other witnesses before him have done.
The extent of this effort reached the highest levels of our government, and it runs right through Mr. Meadows.
There you go. That is some damning allegations from the January 6th committee, which we'll be following very closely. I certainly will be, to see what happens with that. I'm really interested. Coming up in a year since that. Can't believe it. Where were you that day? Also want to give you just this bit of commentary from CNN's Jamie Gangel, as well as Aaron Burnett at the end. I really liked her commentary. This is from CNN's Out Front last night.
That one of the most remarkable things that Liz Cheney has done is she has gone on the record with Don Jr.'s texts. This is an exchange that goes back and forth where he says that, quote, he's got to condemn this shit as soon as possible. And then he says to Mark Meadows again, we need an Oval address. He has to lead now. It has gone too far and gotten out of hand. That's the president's son, who, let's just add, did not go to his father, perhaps could not go to his father, and went to Mark Meadows.
Well, you know, it's amazing to me. The Shakespearean aspect of this really stands out. You have Donald Trump Jr. so like yelling, but so feebly. I mean, it's your father.
Right.
And you got to go to Mark Meadows, who's known the guy for a couple of years, when, you know, you've known him for 40 some odd years. I mean, there's the Shakespearean part of it.
Yeah. So there you go. Aaron Burnett last night with Jamie Gangel on CNN. I thought that was interesting reaction. Lots more to come on the January 6th committee in congressional investigation. The House will vote on it today, and we'll see where it goes from there, whether or not the Department of Justice decides to do anything about it, which odds are they won't. So here is the former nominee for the Democratic Party who lost to President Clinton. It's Hillary Clinton, President Trump, rather. It's Hillary Clinton. She sat down with Willie Geist for, I think this is his podcast. They put out some excerpts, and I thought it was interesting, and so I thought I would share it with you.
And sadly, the Republican Party has gone along with him. And for the life of me, people who I knew, that I served with, who fall in line on the outrageous accusations they make, whether it's against Dr. Tony Fauci or pretending that what happened on January 6th wasn't an insurrection. Honestly, they have hung their spines up on the wall as they walk into their offices. They have no conscience. They have no spine. And we are seeing the results of a party that has been taken over by a demagogue.
Wow. She is not pulling her punches. Not that she ever really did. But here now, a little bit more personal. Hillary Clinton talking about what it's like to be a female politician.
When you're a woman in public life, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. I mean, if you show emotion, that may connect with some people, but for a lot of people, it's like, told you, a woman shouldn't have these jobs. They're too emotional. It's really hard because you want to convey the emotion you feel because it does connect you with many people, but it can be so mercilessly received by the press and the public.
Okay, whether or not you like Hillary Clinton, it is, if you just read that, if you just read those quotes, what she said, I bet you wouldn't have much judgment or disagreement with her on them. Okay, well, let's take a little moment for levity and listen to Snoop Dogg. I guess I just saw this clip, but I guess yesterday the Golden Globe Awards were announced. I don't care about the Golden Globes. I don't know what they are. I guess they're for movies. I thought they were not a thing anymore because they were so bad. But for whatever reason, Snoop Dogg was announcing the nominees, and he announced Ben Affleck. I don't know what movie Ben Affleck is even nominated for. He says it, but he couldn't. He mispronounced Affleck's name, and it's just funny. So here it is.
Best performance by an actor in a supporting role in any motion picture. Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck. My fault. Sorry about that, Ben. Ben Affleck, The Tender Bar.
All right, there you go. That was fun. And now let's go to something much more serious. This is last night. Mehdi Hassan was over at MSNBC sitting in for Chris Hayes, and he had Elie Mystal and Dr. Peter Hotez on for the same segment. So I absolutely loved watching that trio have a conversation. But here's what Dr. Peter Hotez said about just how terrible the misinformation, disinformation, and outright lies and terrible communication from so many of our leaders has been on COVID and the damage that it has wrought.
You calculated at the end of last month that about 150,000 unvaccinated people have died of COVID-19 this year since June alone. Who is to blame for that?
Yeah, this is exactly right. And there are almost no words to describe it. We call it misinformation or disinformation, Mehdi. It's, I don't know what you call it, self-immolation or anti-science aggression. And this is people who've had the option to get vaccinated, could understand that they needed to get vaccinated and deliberately chose not to. Why? Because of the words of members of the United States Congress at the CPAC conference saying that vaccines are political instruments of control, or first they're going to vaccinate you, then they're going to take your guns and Bibles away. And as ridiculous as that sounds to us, a quarter of the nation believed it and needlessly lost their lives. It came out of the conservative news outlets night after night on Fox News, discrediting vaccines. It came from a cultivated group of contrarian intellectuals or pseudo-intellectuals coming out of the far-right think tank who weave this false narrative about vaccines and other COVID prevention measures. This was deliberate anti-science aggression and out of authoritarian rule.
Yeah, Dr. Hotez, what a rant. I really like that one. Okay, well, that's all of the audio I've got for you to play from the news, but I have a whole bunch of other headlines I just want to mention in the news dump. So let's see what kind of news dump jingle the great Pete Coe has cooked up for us today.
Morning check-in of the sheep acting like a grump. It inflicted fatal injuries for today's news dump.
Oh, that is absolutely terrible story. I'm sorry to hear that. And let's get to what else we have on today's news dump. It looks like the new German government that has taken over for Angela Merkel has decided to waive sanctions on the Russian pipeline that was supposed to carry natural gas through Europe and around Ukraine. This is a major, major event coming out of Germany, a decision made by the Green Party and European bureaucrats. Have they outsmarted Vladimir Putin is the question that is being asked. Interesting story to follow. Yesterday, the vice president at the White House rolled out a plan for building out electric vehicle charging network. Plan relies heavily on the bipartisan infrastructure law and existing actions it has taken, but there are some new announcements as well, just in terms of what the law provides, including $7.5 billion to advance build-out of an electric vehicle charging network. But she made a speech about it yesterday with the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, who talked about her solar panels and her Chevy Volt, just like me. The Supreme Court has yesterday declined to block the New York health worker vaccine mandate, which was interesting. Interesting decision from the Supreme Court yesterday. A divided court turning away a pair of religious-based requests temporarily block the New York State's COVID-19 vaccine mandate for healthcare workers. A group of doctors, nurses, and healthcare personnel sought religious exemptions from the mandate enacted this summer, and they didn't get them. So we'll have to unpack that with Eric Siegel maybe later this week. And Minnesota hospitals are now warning that they're overwhelmed. They've taken out a full-page ad in a newspaper saying they were overwhelmed amid a COVID-19 surge and are urging the public to take action. Our emergency departments are overfilled, and we have patients in every bed in our hospitals. We're at the leaders of 9 hospital systems in the state, including the Mayo Clinic and the North Memorial Health. We are not through this yet, not far from it, it would seem. And Time Magazine named its Person of the Year. Elon Musk won the honor. He's the richest man in the world, and a lot of people were pretty pissed about that, including the fact that, maybe the vaccination effort, even though we haven't solved the problem. It's been pretty amazing, and maybe you could give it to that. People somehow that working in that. Healthcare workers. I liked our friend Maura Quint's tweet about it. She wrote, I think this is a solid pick, Elon Musk. No one has done a better job making the case for why we need to tax the rich. Yeah, richest man in the world, worth over $265 billion. And apparently he said that he's planning to colonize Mars and fly a spaceship packed with animals to the planet. So, dude's off, right? Something's going on. I mean, I know he said that he's got Asperger's, but I don't know. Something's going on. Crazy genius, but and not very nice. He also apparently sold 7 of his homes in California. Now lives in a 375 square foot modular home in Texas. I don't know. He is definitely eccentric and very original and very hard to like also. And Fox News announced who they would be replacing the great Chris Wallace with. That's their words, not mine. And apparently it's the recently found guilty for having child porn's Josh Duggar. Yeah, I'm just as surprised as you are right now. I'm kidding, just in case anybody didn't realize that. And attorneys in the Boy Scouts of America bankruptcy case have reached a tentative settlement under which one of the organization's largest insurers would contribute $800 million into a fund for victims of child sexual abuse. The agreement announced Monday calls for Century Indemnity Company and affiliated companies to contribute $800 million into the fund in return for being released from further liability for abuse claims. Payment would bring the amount of money in the proposed trust to more than $2.6 billion and be the largest sexual abuse settlement in U.S. history. And victims of a former U.S. gymnastics doctor, Larry Nassar, also reached a settlement, $380 million with USA Gymnastics. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee and their insurer said on Monday. Lawyer representing some of the victims said the decision brings total compensation to $880 million for their pain and suffering at the hands of the doctor and the institution to enable him. Michigan State University, USA Gymnastics, and the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee reads a statement from them on Monday. All right, well, that's all I've got for today's news dump, and I've got two amazing guests joining me today coming up. Very excited to have both State Senator from Michigan, Mallory McMorrow, joining me for the first time, and always amazing when we get to have an opportunity to talk with Laura Coates, whose new book is out in January. You should pre-order now, but I got to tell you about this amazing electric toothbrush that I now use every single day and absolutely love. It's the Quip electric toothbrush, and if you haven't gotten it yet, you should. It's great. It's completely changed my oral hygiene behaviors because I actually look forward to brushing my teeth. It's the first electric toothbrush accepted by the American Dental Association, backed by over tens of thousands of dental professionals. They have over 20,000 verified 5-star reviews. They have mouthwash and gum and a refillable floss pick and floss string as well. And I love their toothbrush. And I love their toothpaste. Julia keeps stealing it from me, but it's this great anti-cavity toothpaste, of course, and comes in natural mint and watermelon. But the toothbrush is great. It's got a built-in 2-minute timer, which pulses. Like when I'm done with one side, like every 30 seconds to remind me when it's time to switch, which is making a huge difference because 90% of us apparently don't brush for a full 2 minutes or don't clean evenly, but the Quip electric toothbrush helps you keep track. And let's be honest, your mouth gives a lot this time of year, like mistletoe makeouts, karaoke parties, holiday libations. So give it the gift of better oral care with a Quip electric toothbrush. The Quip electric toothbrush is loved by over 7 million mouths, and it has this really cool, lightweight, sleek design for adults and kids. No wires or bulky charger to weigh it down, which is my favorite part of it. Reusable handles and a range of sleek metal hues, including the best-selling all black, which is the one I got because I'm really cool. I use a black toothbrush. You can track and improve your brushing with the free Quip app, earn amazing rewards like free refills, products, and gift cards, and more. There's so much more that you can get out of brushing your teeth. So get Quip. Go to getquip.com/standup right now. And on top of their holiday savings, you'll get your first refill free. That's your first refill free and up to 40% off bundles. Getquip.com/standup. This is an awesome gift. You're thinking, what should I get somebody? Get the toothbrush. Get it right now. You're going to love it. You thank me later. Get Quip. GetQuip.com/standup. Quip, the good habits company. Go get Quip, the electric toothbrush, and you'll be supporting the show at the same time because all of my sponsors help me invest into the show and get more going on it, and including hopefully someone to work with me in the new year. And I'll be talking more about that. But right now it's time to get to one of my all-time favorite humans. We caught up yesterday. We had almost an hour-long conversation. And of course, you know her from, if you've been listening to my show as a regular guest, I'm on the old show, but then she got her own show on SiriusXM, on Urban View, and now on POTUS in my old slot, and I couldn't be happier about that. The idea that I played any role and opening the door for her is one of the most amazing things to me, and it will always be rewarding every time I hear her or watch her on TV or read her new book, which is so good, and I can't put it down, and you got to pre-order it now. Just Pursuit, a black prosecutor's fight for fairness. She's now also a senior legal consultant at CNN. She's got so much going on. Of course, her SiriusXM show on the POTUS channel, 3 to 6 Eastern. She is an Ivy League graduate, a Princeton graduate, and she worked in private practice after law school, then at the United States Department of Justice. She also served as a trial attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice during the Bush and Obama administration, specializing in the enforcement of voting rights throughout the country. Then she served as an assistant United States attorney for the District of Columbia, prosecuting a myriad of violent felony offenses, including drug trafficking, armed offenses, domestic violence, child abuse, and so much more. And she writes all about it in this new book. It is heart-wrenching and honest and vulnerable and very important. She's on Twitter at The Laura Coates, Instagram as well. Go follow her. Let her know you heard her here. And here is my conversation with one of my favorite all-time humans, Laura Coates. All right, I've got the great one now. She is, of course, doing radio, TV, and now she's written a new book which comes out in January, Just Pursuit, A Black Prosecutor's Fight for Fairness. You are the king of all media, the queen of all media.
Well, I kind of thought King gave it a little bit more mystique and intrigue just now. That really did. Let's see how I see your marketing skills there. It makes people scratch their head like you just did and wonder about it. I see you. But no, it's been a crazy, as you know, Pete, as I will say, anytime you and I are on together, that Pete Dominick is the first person to ever put me on the airwaves, period, hands down. And except I'm not counting the first time I called into like a sports show when Tony Kukoc was taking over or coming to the Bulls. I was on radio then, but that was a long, long time ago during the Scottie Pippen years. But they now have made a documentary about our childhood and our younger years, they should say, and the last dance.
Did they include any of your calls in that documentary?
You know, I asked them not to. I wanted to downplay the role I had played in the success of the Chicago Bulls. Being from Minnesota, I figured, if there's ever a Timberwolf sort of history that I could be a part of that. So I asked, just for exclusivity purposes, let's just hold off.
That's cool.
For now.
Yeah.
But we all know you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're doing it all. Politics and legal commentary and sports commentary, apparently. I didn't know about that. And thank you for mentioning, of course, our beginning. You're obviously contractually obligated to me. You're still opening every broadcast. I think it's a little overboard that you give me plugs at your appearances with Wolf Blitzer on CNN. That seems to be, you're talking about some horrible thing. You're like, I am obligated to mention Pete Dominick, but I do appreciate it.
It's called the Rumpelstiltskin clause. It's a new thing. Instead of my first child, because I was like, can we not name the first kid that I have Rumpelstiltskin? I didn't, and the idea of like the little pricking on a loom, whatever that's supposed to be, was old fashioned. So I said, listen, I'll just mention you every time. No, but seriously, Pete, you were the first person. I think we talked about, I can probably remember, we were talking about the legalization of marijuana in DC. I mean, shocking that would be our first conversation, but we were just talking about that.
Yeah, I was asking for you to predict the future. Can't wait. Yeah, I mean, now you've written this book and you've got this whole media career, and it's been fascinating to watch you. And, I am thinking about starting to have my own chant. They have the white supremacists, they have the Jews will not replace us. I am thinking of a Laura Coates won't replace me, but you've actually literally replaced me on my old channel in my old time slot. I mean,
what is wrong with you?
You started out.
What is wrong with you? Oh my God! What a lead-in! I was like, where is Pete Dominick getting ready to go? Where is this conversation getting ready to go? Oh my goodness!
I'm so happy that you're there doing that, and I'm loving the POTUS show. I actually get to listen sometimes. Are you loving doing like the 3 hours on politics and I mean just every day, every afternoon, and getting to interview all of those experts?
I love it. I mean, I used to do the 10 to noon hour on the Urban View channel, and I loved that as well. I love the Urban View family. I love the audience there. It was interesting because when you don't realize the time slot changes in terms of just the development of news throughout the day. There's the morning, what comes in the morning, that comes in all throughout the day, what happens maybe at night, hence the, on television, prime time versus morning, et cetera. So much happens throughout the course of a day that by the time you get to the 3 o'clock slot, you are really running the gamut. You're covering so many things, to the point where I just started calling the POTUS channel the People of the United States channel, because everything about what's going on, I try to cover. And, from a perspective of, look, I understand, like, I care about what's happening on Capitol Hill. I want to know about legislative initiatives. I want to know all these different things, but I really want to know about what matters to people. And I try to focus on the show on a very eclectic range of topics, things that I'm interested in, things I don't know a lot about, things I know a lot about, and have conversations about things. And I just really want people to feel like, as part of the show, this, you're so skilled in this. I mean, I look up to you in your work that you've done on radio and what you continue to do, because you really develop conversations and you ask the questions that people want to know more about. And, the beauty of radio, unlike television, is you get to go behind the soundbite and really go much deeper. And then the callers are fascinating. We run this whole spectrum. So sometimes, I suffer no fools. So people aren't calling to cuss me out. That's not really happening. People have tried and then they go, oh, that's how this is going to go instead. So they really have a conversation. Even if we really disagree, we actually teach people how to have these civil conversations without, fisticuffs, as they say.
I was wondering how you would. I haven't heard you handle like a caller, an adversarial caller, or someone even making a respectful debate. But you were a prosecutor. You know how to argue, and you could eat someone alive. But your goal, I guess, I'm guessing, isn't that your goal is to try to, if the conversation can move, to move it.
Yeah, the conversation. Look, it's a conversation. It's not a competition, right? The idea of there are going to be things I don't agree with you at all, but I really want to get into your mind, not as like a manipulative aspect, but I want to understand what you're thinking. I remember like every other person in the electorate, how often were you finding yourself going, after these exit polls and stuff, and he would go, nobody ever said what they were really doing. No one ever said what they were thinking. Polls were always telling us what they thought was happening. Yeah. And I actually want to understand what people actually think. Like, why do you make the choices you do? Why do you believe the things you believe? And where social media has that place of anonymity, where people tend to want to, dive in, throw a bomb of sorts, and come back out for some toxic reason, radio is like, look, there's an anonymity in being able to actually dip my toe into the conversation, but actually tell you how I feel, have a full thought out conversation, and explain myself without having the toxicity. And I think that's what I need to hear people, to hear what they're doing. And there are times I can explain, but there's also more times for a conversation.
I love, radio. What you're doing on the radio at SiriusXM really is a lot different from what you're doing on TV at CNN. Most of the time at CNN, you are like on panel. You're the senior legal expert there. You're giving legal commentating, but you also now anchoring a lot as well. And but that's like, it's still not radio because while it's live, it's still more scripted. It's way less time. And I'm wondering how much you get outside of you're still doing not only legal commentating when you're on CNN. You might be talking about like the unfolding disaster in Kentucky after the tornado. Have you had to step way outside your comfort level at all on CNN to cover something like that? Or
you know what? It's not so much out of my comfort level, but it is out of the pigeonhole that people expect you to be in, right? And so for me, it's the idea of when you talk about the law, what I'm most drawn to is the law. Every lawyer is a generalist, right? We're expected to be generalists. You got to know a little bit about a lot of things and be competent, fluent, and have an expertise you can demonstrate because that's your job. And so when I think about going to journalism, it really was a similar notion of becoming a generalist and talking about things through a different maybe lens and using a different side of your brain sometimes. But ultimately, it's about the idea of let's talk about it. But I think people sometimes maybe don't expect me to know as much as, about certain topics. And I get it because, right, I don't know everything. I don't even pretend to know everything. But I think what makes a good journalistic experience is that you're willing to ask the questions. And I'm not going to pretend I'm not going to pretend for the sake of, the conversation to not have an opinion, but people really want to have the insight and the information. But I think sometimes there are moments I'm like, most of the time I'm legitimately asking the questions, right? When I ask the questions, it's not, here's the answer I want you to give. It's, here's the question, and I'd like you to answer it. And so if I don't hear an answer, right, I want to probe deeper and understand what the actual answer is, not just sort of a cocktail party hour where we're all pretending to care about the weather a little bit more today than yesterday. Or are these called canops or canopies? How do you pronounce this word? I don't know, but it tastes delightful, right? Are these the Costco brand or did you cater this? My real questions, how can I get this again in my home? I actually am asking the question I want to answer.
Right.
That's how it is. And by the way, why is your lighting so much better than mine? What's happening right now, Pete Dominic?
These are grow lights.
What does that mean?
Like for growing plants.
Oh.
So you just gotta they're just you gotta get some pink grow lights in your studio. But you have an awesome. You have this beautiful piece of art as your backdrop, and
I do. It's not. I love it, but I still,
also
in my light.
There's also a difference for the viewer. Like if people are watching this, our heads are very different. Like you're a pretty lady, and I look like a fucking gargoyle. I look like a ball. Like I look like
no, you don't.
I'm here to fix something, but I can't fix it. So wait. Let me ask you. I have a question. Where are you outside your comfort level? I'm reading your book. I watch your political analysis, your legal analysis. That shit is hard. Like, it's hard to remember all that stuff. You went to Princeton. Are you one of those people who, is not only smart because all the traditional reasons are smart, but you do remember, everything that you learned and then you can then repeat it? Because where are you outside your comfort level? When are you in a conversation that you're like, I don't really want to be in this. I don't know what to say. Because you've kind of a jack of all trades. You're a Renaissance person at this point.
Oh, well, that's so nice of you to think and believe and tell the masses. I appreciate that. I got to tell you, I think, do
you have a cultural blind spot?
I tend to remember the things that made me feel. And so that when it comes to things where my memory is tested, if I can reference it or tie it to a feeling, it's kind of like, in a way, I joke around with my kids. It's like the olfactory senses, right? The things that you smell has these memories. For me, that comes from feelings. And so a lot of the things I write about in my book, everything I write about in my book are things called Just Pursuit, by the way. Oh, this book, here it is. Yeah. Oh, twinsies.
You made the book. That's incest. That's incest. They're all your baby.
No, it's called Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. What's the cutest book of all? Just Pursuit.
It's so good, Laura. The book is so good. You're in the middle of making a point about being able to remember stuff that you put in the book. I don't know how you were so able to be so detailed. Can you read from the book, or is that too early to do that? Or you have an exclusive that you're going to do that somewhere or something?
I can't read it right now. I'll come back on your show later, though.
Okay, because there's a part where you really describe a guy so specifically. This guy who, everyone said knew everything, always within 6 degrees of separation from the latest gossip. Yeah. That guy. Yep. No one ever told him he was that guy.
That he wasn't that guy.
That he wasn't that guy. It's so funny. You're so funny in these really serious, different issues that you're visiting. But I'm so glad that you wrote this book, because this is the book I always wanted you to write, but I didn't think you could or would. Could meaning maybe legally, or even that it would be a really bad idea for you to expose some of the things that you'd experienced. Or would, for any number of reasons. Why did you write this book?
You know what? It was really kind of a humbling and vulnerable experience for me, because as I said earlier, I suffer no fools, but I don't leave myself out of criticism either. I mean, I oftentimes I pride myself in having the conversations about helping people to understand the justice system in America and about the power, whether it's through voting or otherwise. Speaking truth to power, whatever your truth is. But people don't know the truth. And people have to know what the truth is. When you're marching for justice, when you're thinking about how to define justice, when you're thinking about what actually happens, you have to actually know what happens. And I chose to speak through it, not of the esoteric classroom discussion about this statute or this aspect of the Constitution. I do it through storytelling. It's a narrative memoir, and it's a storytelling pretty episodic narrative memoir about the ways in which I had these internal battles of allegiance. What's it like for a Black woman who's civil rights oriented to, one, be a prosecutor, to two, help in a deportation, to be asked to help in a deportation, to have mistaken identity come right, knocking on the courtroom you are in charge of overseeing. Talk about victim blaming in a Me Too era. We talk about how we've got this common refrain of believe women, believe women. Does that happen in a courtroom, or does it not happen in a courtroom? Do we expect more from the people whose daily tasks, daily assignments is to be better, to understand justice more. What happens? Well, I mean, I go down to the South in part of the book and follow along my voting rights cases and what that's been like, or discussions about the gaps between, how prosecutors have their own level of privilege and how we react when others try to exhibit their privilege, and even the tensions between defense counsel and prosecutors and what that looks like. And so I really wanted people, it's the reason I was drawn to the law and drawn to civil rights and prosecution and trial work, was because I thought that people needed to have their stories told and to be able to be their champion and advocate by telling the facts and the truth, not sugarcoating it, not telling the story you want to hear, but here's what actually happens, and allow you the opportunity to do with it, to understand that call to action when you know the truth.
Yeah, there's no sugarcoating in this book. It's so good. I got the pre-order, the whatever version, whatever I got. The advanced copy is what I mean. And I get it.
Oh, wait, here we go again. Hold on. Rumpelstiltskin. Because Pete was the first person to put me on radio of any kind, I made sure. Rumpelstiltskin clause. Hold on. He has a copy, everyone. I was delighted to give it to him. It was also paragraph 6, clause 4, subpart B of the Rumpelstiltskin clause.
This is the best contract I ever forced anybody to sign. So I had so much faith in you. It was such a good bet. So the book comes, I tear it open and I'm like doing nothing. It's Saturday afternoon and I sit down and I read it. And all 3 of my ladies all at some point walk through the room. They always see me sitting in the same spot reading, but I was reading for so long that each one of them was like, wait, what are you reading? You haven't moved. It's so good that I'm halfway through it before I put it down. And for some of the reasons you mentioned, I'll also mention, if you're a Laura Coates super fan, which I'm sure there are many, but I'm one of the OG, then you weave in a lot of your personal stuff, your marriage, your early child, you becoming a mom. And I love that stuff because part of the book is also about work-life balance and about the idea that you are doing what you're doing as a prosecutor for what, at this point, the which office you were in, but you're like pumping milk and like going to work all day. And all that stuff I think is super important and enlightening for any reader. Why did you choose to do that? Did you have to get permission?
No, they were my breasts. So I was talking about my own milk pumping experience. No, I didn't have to ask anyone about that.
I heard they have a Rumpelstiltskin agreement.
I had to give Pete a hard time. I love Pete Dominic. Okay, we're really friends. So there you go. No, I didn't have to give permission, but what it was I had to give myself permission to be as open.
Yeah. Because
I admit I'm a guarded person who likes to preserve my personal life, and I really there's something so sacred to me about, maybe it's me being possessive, but I am possessive about the things I hold dear and the life that I have, and not wanting. And maybe it was partly that I was concerned about being judged. Part of it was concern about not being open. It was always this battle for me. But at the end of the day, I wrote it because I wrote it from a particular time period. I wrote it from the time when it was kind of these, the window into what it was like. I had back-to-back stair-step babies. And so I wrote it from the perspective of what it was like in that window of time when I was carrying my children, really, and what I was physically carrying and what I was carrying in terms of the weight of what I was seeing. And I wanted to write something that my children could better understand me, that I did a lot of self-exploration during the course of writing it. But I also really wanted people to understand that, I don't have the luxury, nor does really anyone else, the luxury of like abandoning who you are when you walk through this door of whatever your respective career is or whatever room you walk in. I mean, I know that like Elon Musk was the Time Person of the Year right now, but unlike these rockets that go to space and they shed something on the way up, and they, all the baggage that goes around. That is, by the way, the extent to which I know anything about space exploration.
I think we found your blind spot.
I can't, it's my blinds. I'm literally holding my ring finger and pinky together to give you the Spock signal because I can't even do that. Thank you very much. So there's that. But I will say, for me, I never had the luxury of being able to say, you know what, I'm going to abandon some parts of my identity. I'm going to approach the practice of law or prosecution simply from the perspective of the words on the page. When I prosecuted, when I was a civil rights attorney, when I was with the Department of Justice, when I was anything I did, I came in as a whole person. I came in with baggage. I came in with, priorities. I came in with maybe untapped bias, perhaps. Everyone does. I don't know what I come with. I know I was coming in from the perspective of being a Black woman, a wife, a mother, a human being. And it would have been disingenuous if I had told the stories of what happens from the perspective of, an android.
But I don't know. I guess when I first met you, you were obviously more guarded then publicly and certainly even privately. And I guess I really never thought that you would, share this much. Certainly we've become good friends, and I know a lot about your life, met your family, but I was just so happy that you did for so many reasons, because I think it's important that you bring all of your own personal life and experience, especially to the job that you had working for the government as a prosecutor. At one point, you write in the book something about, you'd been underestimated most of your life. And I realized that I try to think hard about the people I know best. And I realized that I underestimated you at one point. I knew you were a brilliant legal mind and you were a great commentator. I know. But I always love to remind you of the time I was listening to you on the radio. I was driving down the highway. You were hosting a show. I think at that point it was your show. It might have still been my show, but you got your own show, of course, on Sirius. And anyway, I'm listening, and you told a story so funny about tripping and falling in front of a homeless man and being judged by him. It was so funny.
He judged me. We had a moment.
It was so funny that I got angry. I was angry. I was like, how is she also that funny? And I underestimated, I suppose, your humor for whatever reason, because of all of the rest of your credibility. What is it? Is it a good thing to be underestimated, or is it a bad thing?
I think it depends on your mental strength. I think, in the idea of how you deal with people's judgment of you and perception, right? If it means everything, how somebody else perceives you, I suppose it would hurt. But if you are, and I think it's a gift, the idea of, I focus very little on a day-to-day basis of people's, weighing in on who they think you are and the assumptions they make, because it's just that's a very toxic place to be. But I think underestimated, I think it gives me creative room on some levels for people not to know what to expect. On the other hand, I think that sometimes when I'm underestimated, as everyone feels this way, it can close doors, and there are opportunities that are foreclosed before you even know there's even an option for you, because people think, she or he can't do that. There was that Jay-Z line of, I'd rather be underestimated than underpaid. I mean, you can judge it from that way, and I think I got that wrong. Let me Google it. I don't lose my black card. Hold on a second.
Well,
I'll just say this. I paraphrased Jay-Z just now, but the point is, I think people are underestimated in all things that they do. And I think that the key for me is, and how I think one of my survival tactics is, and what I pride myself on, and that I've learned over the course of my 41 years now, is as long as I don't underestimate myself, I'm okay.
Well, I like that.
Thank you for that pregnant pause you just gave, and that contemplative look off to the right that you gave.
Oh, that was nice. No, I was just looking up that Jay-Z quote. I went from the favorite to the most hated, but would you rather be underpaid or overrated?
Overrated. That's what it is. Would you rather be underpaid or overrated? There you go. Oh, damn it!
No, but I like that. I like everything that you just said. I think that's a really very specific and personal worldview that I share. I appreciate that a lot. So you talk so much about the justice system from the vantage point of the role that you played and experienced as a prosecutor and in the courtroom, and you explain a lot of the other roles, but you also talk a good bit about race. You talk about the the Hispanic immigrant. You talk about this young black man who's in your courtroom, a black woman who is a victim of a crime, who, I mean, just every single chapter is so good. And you actually describe them really well on your Instagram page. This is a real professional outfit you're working with this book. And
thank you.
I'm wondering, like, it just kind of seems like the entire criminal justice system is rigged against people of color at almost every part of it. And it's so hard to get out once you're in. And I wonder, from the vantage point of all the different roles you played, when you talk about how that got to you, and it's just so pervasive. And I think people don't talk about it nearly as much as they do with policing than they do in courts.
I think that's because, as I said, people don't necessarily, people will speak about what they know and what they are learning from, which is why it was so important to really have a personalized approach in storytelling for this, because I wanted people to, in some respects, see themselves in each chapter, see themselves. Obviously, it's through the lens of myself, but see yourself and what would you have done? Because I really think there is value in people being able to put themselves in the shoes of another person, to be able to figure out, in a world of, I wish somebody would, or here's what I would have done, to really think about what that would look like through the constraints of the justice system. However, what I made sure to also include is there are real moments of triumph and real moments of human connection in our justice system. There are real moments where, kindness emerges in the most unexpected places, and humanity is, exemplified. And those are real moments that are also a part of the justice system. And it comes from some very unlikely places. Sometimes it's through the lens of the family of a victim who are intent on showing mercy. Sometimes it's just the kindness between colleagues. Sometimes it's the shared glances that are exchanged that move a needle forward. And those things all happen. And I think that's also important because none of this is binary. It's not either rigged or fair. It's a scale. And justice sometimes is not as easily defined. And I think this book, and what I was hoping to do through all forms of commentary, is to help people really understand that there is no one definition. And for that reason, there can be a variety of approaches to solving some of the problems that we have. That if we only think about it, if justice reform only equals the end of qualified immunity, or it only equals a grand jury process changing, or bail reform, if it only equals that, right, it gives politicians an escape hatch. Because if they can't solve that, well, there you go. We'll just throw up our hands instead. And then, okay, well, there's nothing we can do. Oh, well, that issue is now, that was it. That's how we define it. That's how we do it. Well, I don't want exit ramps. I want us to stay on the course. And there are many ways to approach justice, to define justice, and to achieve justice. And, I'm a lawyer, and just like doctors, we practice our profession. We practice medicine, we practice law, and we pursue justice. And I want, at some point, it to be the dog that catches the car, and what our world will look like when it does.
Well, let me ask you then about a couple of the just larger issues that you've been covering on your show and at CNN that aren't so specific to the book. But I want to have you back when it's out, or as much as you want. I'll talk about each chapter until everybody in the world buys this book, because, I also think that my world, or my thoughts, changed on criminal justice in America and around, I want to say, like, whenever Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, came out. Because when I read that book, I realized that there were, even victims of crime, people of color, legal experts that didn't know a lot of shit that was happening in our criminal justice system. Your book basically takes some of the work, some of the injustice that she talks about, and actually puts actual real life stories to it in each chapter, and kind of documents so much of the injustice that you witnessed. And I don't know where you learned to write so well, but it's really well written. Did you have help?
You.
Are you this good of a writer?
No, well, are you going to hate me if I tell you I wrote it?
Who helped you? Did John Grisham?
No. Oh, John Grisham. No, because he didn't want to introduce me to Tom Cruise. So I said, the hell with it.
When I met him,
I wrote it. It's my work. I wrote it. And that was something that was very important to me, to make sure that it was my words, my experiences, and that, for good or for bad, this is who I am. I don't think you can ever delegate that. You can't delegate yourself away.
I love that. I was just teasing you. I didn't think you had any help.
But if you know John Grisham, I mean, if he wants to write number 2.
I met John Grisham at the Colbert Report, and I taught him.
What a name drop! Oh, I met John Grisham at the Colbert Report when I was having tea with the Queen.
That's my Rumpelstiltskin agreement. And I told him, I got so nervous, I kept telling him books that he had written that I liked.
You did not? Did you really? Oh God, was he like, wow, tell me more about that?
He was and he's like super tall, and I was like looking up at him and like,
really?
I really like The Firm, and he was like, thank you. And I was like, yeah, I liked it when this one part. Do you ever have that now that you're like basically famous? Do people come up to you and be like, I just love you, and then you're like, thank you, and then they don't really know what to say because they're so excited just to see you?
No, because I'm not very tall. People usually pass me by and have no idea who I am.
Who's that little girl? She looks like
little girl. Go back to school.
She looks like Laura Coates on CNN. She looks like
learning.
She looks exactly like Laura Coates on CNN, but Laura Coates on CNN is 6'2", and that little girl is like 2 apples. So,
well, first of all, you've been on. You do commentary. They make us all the same height.
Yeah. You look on TV. Yeah.
David Gergen is about 9 feet tall, but next to me, he's the same height as me. Right. And I'm like, how does that make you feel? He just kind of nods.
When you and Gergen are on the same panel, they actually make him sit on the floor, which I think is really interesting. So what I was going to ask you, though, is where a lot of your expertise, and I think some of the book certainly crosses over into reality right now, I feel like the most important thing that we can do right now in this country is pass voting rights and bring back what the gains that had been made with the Voting Rights Act. And how much are you talking about that, and how much does that affect everything in your book? All of criminal justice depends on who's in what office making what laws.
I really loved my time in the voting section of the Civil Rights Division. It was really an unbelievable honor, because when I think about wanting to be a lawyer, when I think about wanting to focus on any aspect of my career, I really take seriously those that came before me. I really take seriously the idea of all of the people, sung and unsung heroes, who played a role in even the opportunity for this little girl to do what I do. For this person to be in a position, for anyone. You're talking about my mom grew up in the segregated Jim Crow South. My father, grew up in, outside in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it's still 1952, 1950s, right? There's still young Black children in that version of America. And there are so many moments that I see, similar experiences that I should not have, conversations that continue to happen. And a lot of that, even lessons that my parents would teach me, their parents would teach them, that I still now have to teach my kids. The fact that I'm still having conversations about voting rights, being on a chopping block, or rolling back these elements of democracy is offensive to me. And it's shocking to me. And so it tells me there's still a lot of work to be done. And Congress has within its power the ability to recalibrate the formula of Section 5, that the Supreme Court said was no longer necessary. It's shameful they have chosen not to do so. I recognize the political hurdles in place that prevent it from being expediently accomplished, but it doesn't matter there are hurdles, it still should be accomplished. And so every conversation we have, whether it's discussions about the big lie, conversations about criminal justice reform, conversations about immigration policy, conversations about healthcare, conversations about inflation, about our school system, about, infrastructure. I don't care what conversation you're having. You exclude people from each aspect when you take away their right to elect someone of their choosing.
Exactly.
And because this has not been a centralized focus, it is shameful in a democracy. And so, and it's more than just talking about voting rights at the sexiest of elections. People want to talk about it for the presidential election. Let's talk about it for the water board, the water utility, the school board. Talk about the local elections that are impactful as well. And until we start having a real conversation, Pete, and you know this, about the things that give you entree into your rights, we will have none.
Whew, well said. I'm going to let you go because it's time for dinner. The book is available.
What are you having for dinner?
I'm having. I got to be honest, it's because I'm talking to you, but I wasn't expecting to be asked. I'm having chili and potato skins.
Are they on the potato skins?
Like my daughter works at this restaurant, and she brought home from the restaurant like potato skins.
Are you gonna have cheese and sour cream on it, or is there a sour cream shortage?
Yes, yeah.
I almost said, is there a sour cream shortage? I don't know why that where my diction went when we talked about sour cream. I'm gonna have some salmon, some white rice, and maybe I'll make something. I'm probably gonna have a pint of ice cream afterwards. But I mean, I'm initially gonna lead into that dessert in a good way. My husband made it today, so I don't really know. I think we're gonna have that. He makes delightful salmon.
I really thought you meant that he made the ice cream. I was like, what the made ice cream?
Wow. Is that what you think happens in my house? That people, are making ice cream? That's weird. That's a Monday night thing we're doing?
I know he's an impressive dude.
He is impressive. But when if he starts making ice cream, I may not ever leave my house.
Thank you, Laura Coates.
Thank you, Pete Dominic. Love you.
Love you. All right, there she goes, the Laura Coates, the great one, as I call her, because she's the best. And I'm just so excited for her success and to see where she's going. The sky is limit with that woman. She inspires me each and every day. I'm so happy that her voice is out there on the radio and on TV and now in this book. I highly recommend you go get it. There's a link to it in the show notes. Just Pursuit, a black prosecutor's fight for fairness. Laura Coates. So good. Another really great, amazing human being, woman joining me now. I've just found out about her 2 weeks ago when I heard her floor speech in the Michigan State Senate after the shooting in Oxford, Michigan. And it went really viral, her floor speech. And so I said I played the entire thing here on the show. You may have heard it. And I said, I got to get her on. I should invite her to come on the show. And then Carlo up in Canada beat me to the punch. And he emailed her and said, I loved hearing from you. Pete Dominic played your full speech. He said he was going to get you on. I hope that you'll join him. So I followed up. He copied me on that email. And I was like, thanks, Carlo. Nice to meet you, Senator, and her people. And I invited her on, and we sat down actually over the weekend and had a great conversation. She served her first term in the Michigan Senate. She won her first campaign. She gained more than a decade of experience in product design before that, media and advertising through her work at Mazda and Mattel and Gawker Media, as well as some other global brands. She got her bachelor's degree in design from University of Notre Dame. And she lives in Royal Oak with her husband and their daughter and their rescued dog, who they named Detroit. Her website is McMorrow for Michigan. You can donate to her election campaign at the show links and follow her on Twitter at Mallory McMorrow. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. All right, well, as promised, she's joining me right now from her district in Michigan, I think. Actually, don't know where she is, but I'm so excited to talk to you. Senator Mallory McMorrow, welcome to Stand Up. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to ask you questions.
Pete, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you are a really interesting person, so I want to talk a little bit about you and then get to the amazing work that you're doing now in the Michigan Senate. But you grew up on the East Coast, but you somehow landed in Michigan, and now you're representing the 13th district in the Michigan State Legislature. And I don't know how old you are, but you're pretty young, it would seem. And so just tell me how you got there.
Sure. So I am the youngest woman who's ever been elected to the Senate in Michigan. I'm 35 now, but ran for office for the first time ever in 2018. I've lived in 5 other states, built most of my career in car design, toy design. I was a designer for Hot Wheels. I was the creative director for Gawker Media in New York. But my husband's originally from Michigan, and we moved back in 2014. So saw 2014 turn into 2015, turn into 2016, and the 2016 election. And Michigan feels like a microcosm of everything that was happening in the entire country. So I woke up the day after the 2016 election, looked outside, thought the world was going to be on fire. It wasn't, but felt like I had to do something. So I found the Women's March, went to the Women's March in Detroit, met a lot of people, networked, and just tried to figure out what the hell do we do next? And now I'm here.
When did you decide to run, and how did you win? Because I guess the things working against you are you're not from there. You didn't grow up. And if you're going against some guy who's got a road named after him, that's tough. Or a guy. I don't know if being a woman in that district is an advantage. I'm guessing it's generally not. And then I guess that I say, yeah, you're young. So, and I don't know about your experience, but like just deciding to run and win your first campaign for Michigan State Senate. How did you do that? A lot of people want to do what you did, and it's super hard.
Yeah, it is. So I Googled how to run for office, which is nuts. So that was step one, and found an organization called She Should Run, which had, a downloadable digital book about how to run for office. And then just started getting involved. I started hosting postcard writing parties and phone banking parties at my house with people, just to call our representatives and elected officials and push them on issues. And it started growing. And eventually somebody said, have you ever thought about actually running? So I found an organization called Emerge America, which recruits and trains Democratic women on how to run for office. They had a chapter in Michigan. I applied. It was 6 months of every weekend meeting at a union hall and learning how to write a campaign plan and how to fundraise and, how to put a team together, and decided to go for it against a Republican incumbent in a Republican district that has never been represented by a Democrat. And nobody thought we could do it, even within my own party. The kind of running joke when I told people what I was doing was, you're going to get destroyed, but you'll build your name recognition and you can run for city council. So that was the attitude. So we had nothing to lose. And it just kept growing and growing. And then we started to see, what 2018 was looking like. And I started getting partnerships with groups like Sister District and some national organizations who said, okay, the suburbs outside of Detroit, that's going to be an area that's going to do some really interesting things. And it was led by women, a lot of women who ran for the first time, a lot of women who are pissed. And I'm the only person who beat an incumbent in 2018. And it cost $2.6 million between myself and my opponent.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because I got recruited to run for something. And I looked at running for something, and anybody who looks at running for something eventually comes up to, how much money? Where does the money come from? How do you get money? What's the money for? And what do I owe people who give me the money thing? As you know, and I'm sure we could talk about for hours, is a huge issue. But seeing as it's so broken, you have to play within those rules. You have to raise as much money as your competitor, or at least close to, so you can get the kind of attention. So how did you do it?
Totally. I mean, the crappy reality. Can we curse on here? I
say anything you want. Yeah. It's your reputation, Senator.
The shitty reality is that 80% of the time, the person with more money wins the election. And we need campaign finance reform because I quit my job to run for office full time for a year and a half. I was running a consultancy. I've never not had an income. I've been working since I was 12. And I wouldn't have been able to do it if my husband didn't tell me to go for it, and that you would regret if you didn't do it with every fiber of your being. And I know that's not something a lot of people can do. I could, and I did. And asking for money sucks. There was nothing that makes you feel more vulnerable. You start with people so it's like your friends, your family, people who love you, and will support you no matter what. But then I got into, pulling the list of people I graduated college with, and I'm just cold calling them. And I got people who were like, how did you get this number? Do I remember you? Like, we might have met at a party once, and you're just asking them for money. And it is terrible. But it's just part of the grind, and you have to separate yourself. You're not asking money for you. Like, I'm not keeping this money, but this is what I'm doing. I'm giving up a lot of myself. There's a lot of change that needs to happen. So you're asking them to invest in that. you just happen to be the person has their name and picture on everything.
Let me just ask you about, since you've gotten elected, you talked about when you got elected and the timing of that and the wave of the blue wave of feminism, if you will, the spark of the women's movement, the spark of Trump actually winning the election after he did what he's done in his life, women. And I wonder, and you beat this Republican incumbent. And so I wonder what's happened in your district based on COVID, based on the economy, based on lockdowns and politics since you've taken that seat. I've done like a ton of prep on you. I see how hard you're actually working to contact your constituents, talking about all kinds of bills about bus drivers and the things that most people, you're doing the work. I don't know if they see you doing, how have attitudes changed as a result of the fact that the country has gone into chaos, specifically in Michigan, with everything. I read your piece about the Governor Whitmer kidnapping, something that you were there for. I mean, crazy stuff happening in Michigan. What's happened in the 13th district where you're the senator in terms of attitudes? Are you doing well?
Yeah. So Oakland County, I represent what is currently the wealthiest district in the state. It's just outside of Detroit, but it's a lot of higher income, very highly educated people. And it's that trend that we've seen around the country where, it used to be that college educated people aligned themselves with the Republican Party, and that's changing. So I think a lot of that is still there, but Michigan is a dichotomy. Every time I talk to somebody from another state, we are a state that elected Gretchen Whitmer, Dana Nessel, who's an openly gay, badass attorney general, but we have more homegrown militia activity than any other state in the country who come to our state capital with guns and threaten us. And it's horrifying. It's horrifying. And it is, how do you bridge that divide? And my hope is just being visible and talking to my constituents and saying what's up and being very honest. With what happened in Oxford, people are devastated that we haven't been able to do anything on this issue. So, I think that I'm in line with where my district is. But the reality is there are people who want to wear you down and threaten your life and make it so hard to do your job that you quit.
What do you deal with? You've talked openly about this, so I don't mind asking you about it. And, you mentioned Gretchen Whitmer and the Attorney General, Dana Nessel. If you pay close attention to politics, you see something's going on in Michigan where you've got a lot of powerful women in office, working in government. Jocelyn Benson is the Secretary of State. You're there now, gained a lot of notoriety. And so as much as, we cheer for that and we're excited to see that, you also know, and you also you don't want to talk about it. You're like, well, women in power means women receiving all kinds of threats. And I wondered if you could share kind of what you have to deal with on hopefully not a regular basis, but I fear maybe.
It is. It's a very different kind of pressure. And we actually saw this even before I took office. So, I ran against an incumbent. I was in my early 30s when I ran, and the ads against me were all sexist and based on the fact that I'm a woman. So there was a huge, poster sized mailer that went out that had a picture of me that they had stolen from social media, sitting by a pool, drinking a cocktail, and it had a curling iron on it. And printed on the curling iron said, "Vote no on McMorrow." And it implied that, she's bringing California values to Michigan. And, I'm not from California originally. I worked there for a few years.
Do you guys not have pools and curling irons? In what did they focus group that ad? This says California girl.
Yeah. Because my biggest challenge in 2018 was name recognition. I've never run before. This was my thing. And that won me the election, that piece, because that turned into the Detroit Free Press wrote a whole story about how sexism's not dead, because all the attacks on my opponent.
Wait, I didn't even think about that. Let me think of it differently. Yeah. Their attack ad was you in a bathing suit?
Yes.
So they're showing your body.
Yeah.
And that says, this is not a senator or something. I don't know what it's
implied. Don't vote for this silly girl, right? It was somebody who drinks and sits by a pool and has a curling iron is not somebody who's a serious person, right? It was never about education, background. I ran a small business, none of that. It was just, look at this girl drinking a margarita.
Did you ever? Can we overthink this for 12 more hours? Did you ever think, Who jumped in and was like, throw a curling iron in. Definitely put a curling iron in the picture.
So the funny thing about that, because people asked me about it, and I was like, well, if they had done any research at all, it would be a straightening iron because my hair is naturally curly. So.
That's funny. Okay, so let's get back to but the threats.
But the threats, yeah. So that set the tone, right? It's like if you're a woman in power, people are very threatened by that just because you're a woman.
Yeah.
So, I talk to my male colleagues about this all the time. Like they get, aggressive emails and phone calls, but it's about their votes and it's about, I'm not going to vote for you and you don't align with me. With us, it is rape threats. It's death threats that happen regularly. It is people calling me a bad mom. It is, my husband is Jewish and I talked to somebody who called us and was pissed and said that, the governor is like Hitler. And I said, listen, you're allowed to express your frustrations, but we don't tolerate anti-Semitism in my office. And his response is, you are the exact type of person who killed your husband's family in the Holocaust. How do you respond to that? And we had it just this week. Somebody called our office and said, don't ever let me catch you in public because you're not going to make it.
What? Just going back to something you said, I don't want to gloss over. I want to actually know what you think. You said some people are threatened when women are in power. I don't know if you said in power in office, whatever you said.
Yeah.
I don't. Why do you think they are? How do you pose a threat as a woman to some people?
I think that, especially over the last few years, I think it has been revealed and accepted that there's still a traditional way of thinking where women are second, right? And I tried to sound this alarm when we had what I like to think, I don't like to think of it, but what was effectively the trial insurrection at our state capitol on April 30th of 2020, which was supposedly about frustration over COVID restrictions, but featured Barbie dolls hanging on nooses, Confederate flags, swastikas. It was all of these hateful images and imagery. And a lot of it is about, if it's a woman, she's a tyrant or she's a queen or she's just this language that you don't hear with men. Men, it's about what they do. Women, it's about who we are. And just, we're not supposed to be here. I had a woman in my district when I was running for office ask me, do you have any kids? When are you planning on having kids? How many kids are you planning on having? And then said, I can't vote for you because this isn't a job for a mom. You need to be able to have time to do the job.
Okay,
so
it sounds like she's projecting. But let me try. Can I try and get your response?
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's everything you said, obviously. But what I see all the time, and I think a lot of it is obviously not even obvious to the person. It's not conscious. I don't want a woman to tell me what to do. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Is an attitude that a lot of Americans have, and we can talk about that, individualism. Don't tell me what to do. I don't want the government to tell me what to do. And I definitely don't want a woman governor or person to tell me what to do. It's this kind of be subservient, or I'm in power, or gender role thing. How much of it is, I just don't want a woman telling me what to do.
It's weird clapback. It's like, you're not my mom, right? You don't tell me what to do. I'm an adult now. You're not my mom. And it is so ingrained in certain people. And it is that visceral. And my male colleagues say, I don't get the same things that you do. I don't get rape threats and death threats and just hateful remarks on your body. For whatever reason, people regularly say, I'm a man. She must be transgender, which is like, I don't understand what level of hatred that is, but it happens all the time.
People regularly say that Mallory McMorrow is not a woman.
Yeah. And
what is weird?
One of my staffers joked with me yesterday. She's like, well, they said that about Michelle Obama all the time. So you're in good company. I'm just, I can't.
Yeah. That's the only other.
Wrap my head around like, okay, well.
There's a psychological reason that someone does that, and I want to know what it is. But let me ask you, though, getting back to the gun issue, which is certainly where you landed on my map, on the national map. You went viral, I think, at least last week with a floor speech you made, and I couldn't edit it out. I always do audio clips at the top of the podcast, but I couldn't edit one piece. It needed to be in its full context. I played the whole 4 minutes. I try to do that when I find something that's really powerful and that I don't press stop on myself. And tell us, a little bit about how your community is reacting to the shooting at Oxford High School, which is just outside your district. But as you told me right before I hit record, a lot of people that live in your district work there. It's right there on the edge of your district. So it's basically part of your community. I mean, take me through this shooting, your reaction to it, and kind of what brought you to this issue, which you've seen before. Obviously, you mentioned the guns at that protest to brought you to this floor speech and whether or not you think anything can be done. Sorry for asking a bunch, but just take that however you want.
No, yeah. It's horrifying. It was horrifying to get a text that was, first when we knew that there was a shooting at Oxford High School. And there's a sink in the pit of your stomach when it happens. And then the more that we learned about it, the worse it got. It's a 15-year-old with a gun, killed 4 other children. And it's a gun that his parents bought him. And this was a kid that literally cried for help. Dude drew a drawing that said, "Help me, the thoughts won't stop." And his parents refused to take him home. And, one of my colleagues, after I spoke on the floor, stood up in response to my speech and effectively accused me of not thinking before I speak and said, "The families haven't even had time to mourn yet. How dare you?"
Ugh.
But that morning, the morning I gave the speech, a teacher who teaches at Oxford, who is my constituent, messaged me and said, my colleagues and we need to do something more productive than cry. This shouldn't have happened. She lost one of her kids and
students.
Yeah. One of her students. And that reaction, it's not, anytime you lose somebody, it's terrible. This wasn't a car accident. Right. This wasn't, this was a school shooting. We have had school shootings for 22 years since Columbine. I participated in my first active shooter drill when I was in 7th grade after Columbine, and we haven't done anything. So one of my best friends growing up lost her older brother, somebody I knew, somebody I grew up with, in the Virginia Tech shooting, was killed. So I've already gone through what this does to your friends and your community and your families, and to have it happen again to more people that I care about. I was just pissed. And I think a lot of people are pissed. People directly in the community are pissed. And their immediate response was, yes, we're mourning, but we also need to do something.
So the do something is a really important issue. I've talked for years about this issue with activists and the presidents of, all of the major organizations, nonprofits working to create gun laws, regulations. And I think the problem happens with the fact that we haven't really had major national federal legislation. But as you know better than anybody, so much change can occur at the state level. And in states like Connecticut, where Sandy Hook was, and in states like my state and New York and California and other states, they do pass really important laws that make a huge difference. And I would argue save lives and keep guns out of people who would use them on themselves or others. And it makes a big difference. But people get so jaded because they don't see something get passed through our stupid U.S. Senate. But the concern then, of course, is even if you pass some important law at the state level, what happens when it gets challenged at the Supreme Court? This Supreme Court run by Clint Eastwood. So, what do you think can be done at the state level? How much of a difference does it actually make and satisfy activists who want to see change? And then do you get concerned about, even if you pass a law, it's going to get struck down by this Supreme Court?
Yeah, I think you brought up a point that I try to explain to people all the time. We all get caught up in national news and what is happening in Washington and what is happening in the Supreme Court. But the reality is, for people that align with my point of view, we've been paying attention to that for too long and ignoring what happens on the state level. And
which is why we're here. Sorry.
Which is exactly why we're here. Because on the state level is where you get the Texas abortion law, is where you get these laws that get challenged and move their way up to the Supreme Court. They start at the state level. And also there was a coordinated effort to overturn the last election in the states, with state legislatures being pushed to appoint alternative electors, all these sorts of things. So what happens in the states is critical. Nothing happens on the federal level if it doesn't happen in the states. It starts here. And if we ignore it, that's where we end up. So we have to make it an issue, and it has to be a singular issue. We've told a lot of parents and people in Oxford, this needs to be your issue. Next time you go to the ballot, ask every single person running for every single office, are they going to take any steps at all for reasonable solutions to gun safety? Nothing we've proposed over the past years is, Democrats are coming to take your guns. It's safety measures. And we can't even get those across because, frankly, there isn't a lobbying arm with the power or influence that the NRA has had. And I got emails from Republicans this week, all over the past week, Republican staffers who worked for, people in the legislature previously, who flat out said, thank you for what you said, because you're right. 80%, 90% of people agree on reasonable safety measures. The legislature is way off from where public opinion is, but people get to the polls and they're like, well, I want low taxes, and just forget about kids are murdering kids.
So I don't know Michigan politics well enough to understand how your state legislature works and majorities and vetoes and stuff. And you touched on it earlier. I do know Michigan well enough to know that there's Detroit and there's like Ann Arbor, in the college towns. And there's really then the rest of the state, which is less populated, more rural, and filled with what I would call terrorist training camps, militias everywhere. When it comes to guns, what are the politics in Michigan state that you can or cannot get in the majorities gun laws passed? Like, what are you up against? What's the score?
Yeah. So the legislature, particularly the Michigan Senate, has been Republican controlled since 1984.
Okay.
So when it comes to presidential elections, statewide elections, governor's races, we're a pretty reliably Democratic state, but it's the off years when we have legislature up, all these states that were split. So we've been divided government longer than I've been alive. And we haven't even been able to convince my Republican colleagues who are in charge to prohibit guns from being in our state capital, a place where fourth graders come on school trips every week. So we had, people bringing full tactical military training gear, on Gears of War cosplay or whatever it is they want to think they're doing, to threaten us, and they stood in our gallery, like quite literally, it's a fishbowl that I work in and I sit in, and people with guns stood above us and taunted us.
I saw the picture that you, I think, shared on social from that day. And I said, no, this can't be what she's describing, because you described we're in the well of the Senate and the photo is looking up and there were all these douchebags up armored, but you could describe it as a fishbowl. You're literally sitting ducks. How on earth can you be allowed to go into the Michigan State House with a gun, much less the actual Senate with a gun? How is that possible?
It's allowed. Not only is it allowed, our Senate Majority Leader that day went up into the gallery to have a meeting with them, and then took a meeting with them a few weeks later to help the militia groups work on their branding, because he has so much in common with them. And it came out, I'm like, they tried to kill us. And then the FBI revealed months later, they literally tried to kill us. They had a plan. They were meeting. They wanted to not only kidnap the governor and do God knows what, but the secondary plan was take over the Capitol and carry out public executions of us.
And just to be clear, the people that were there that day at that protest, this got confusing for me when I was preparing to talk to you.
Yeah.
That was separate than when they stormed the State House weeks later, I guess. And just to be clear, the senator isn't saying two groups. The same people that were there on the protest, it was found out, were later arrested.
Yeah.
They were arrested for the threats on your governor.
They were so they used the protests at our Capitol to recruit people.
Right. Unhallowed ground. It's terrifying. It's just terrifying. And I think you've done a good job of kind of, describing as much as you can. I mean, most of it's chilling to hear you describe what you're hearing in terms of the threats and a lot of people would just quit and are quitting as a result of this. Yeah. Maybe you're just a young, naive woman, and maybe you should, you've got a child now. Maybe you've done your part, and maybe you should, do something else. Go back to your amazing other career that you had before this in design.
it's a hard thing to justify sometimes. I have people who love me and care about me and watch, whenever Michigan's on national news lately, it's usually not for good reason, unfortunately. Right. And that's hard. But I keep coming back to, I had already given up my career to do this because of what I saw in 2016, because there was a video that went viral in my district of fifth graders chanting, "Build that wall" at another student because Donald Trump made that okay. And if we quit, who comes in to take our place? I mean, this is,
I think in Michigan, it's Magneto from the Marvel Cinema Universe. I mean, it's at this point, it's fictional characters. It's a Klan hood. It's a burning cross. It's a rifle. It's not even a person. It's gotten so extreme and so scary that it is hard to know. And that's why someone like you in office, it sucks to have to say it, but it's really brave that you just go to work every day. And I just hate that for you and your family and anybody else across the country who is serving, because it discourages super qualified, passionate, smart people from doing the job. I mean, you're seeing nurses and doctors quit just because people won't get vaccinated and they're putting them in danger. It's brave people doing important work. They shouldn't have to be brave every day. You're not a firefighter.
No, and I've had, people push back on me because I talk about these things pretty publicly because I think it's important to say this is the reality. And, every now and then I get somebody who's like, well, that's part of the job. You should grow thicker skin. It shouldn't be part of the job. This is supposed to work that regular people run and are elected in office. That's how our democracy is set up. It's supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people, not, are you willing to deal with death threats on your life regularly? And you just need to grow thicker skin. So, my hope is that I talk about it not to complain or ask for pity, but to say this is the reality right now. And if it's not okay with you, you need to get involved and help us. I mean,
it's saying you need to grow thicker skin. I'm sorry for what I'm about to say, but I'm not really. It's that's like saying how the response is almost how thick does my skin have to be to prevent a bullet? I mean, I don't want to have to wear a vest, and the idea that you're even using it in metaphor is so weak and stupid. What are you talking about? You have a thick skin.
I was so careful with writing the speech that I wrote to give on the floor. And, because you get into this fight over the Second Amendment is right and it shall not be infringed. But I was very careful to say, why are children's lives worth less than guns? Not your rights, guns, because we have seen record gun sales year after year after year after year. So it's not even, nobody is coming after your rights. It's not harder to get a gun and get a lot of them if you want to. But it's this decision, it's a policy decision that's been made that gun sales are more important than people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a new book about that written by, where is it? He's written by a former gun executive. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but.
Yeah, I just heard him on some podcast.
On the Daily Show. Maybe he's been on the show. Ryan Busey is his name.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, he's saying what you're saying. Did the threats spike after you made this speech last week? Because as soon as you talk about guns and abortion, something changes in your mentions, and these are such volatile, but especially with guns, I think. What changed, if anything?
So we were on high alert after that. Yeah. And I have to give a lot of credit to, our Senate sergeants, the people who kind of work, and they're much more attuned to these things, I think, after we had April 30th in our Capitol. So I kind of gave them a heads up. I said, this is going to be something I'm going to be talking about. It's going to be a sensitive issue. We know anytime I say things like this, we get blowback. I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, have gotten a ton of feedback and response. It has been overwhelmingly positive.
That's awesome.
Which is great.
That's awesome.
Even lifelong gun owners, Republicans, because I didn't stand up and say, we need to take all of your guns. I just said, we have to do something.
Right.
Something.
Do you think anything can get done through the legislature? Any law at this point, given the politics and given the makeup of the Senate?
In this current legislature, unfortunately, no. But I'm up for re-election next year, as is the Senate and the House, and we have new district lines. And
but just real quick, just take me inside the belly of the beast. When you say unfortunately no, do you go over to your Republican Senate colleagues or anybody else and say, do you just be like, is there anything background check, anything at all? I'm not saying anything about Is there anything we could do that we could agree on? Even, mental health funding. Do you do that? And what do they say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I am part of the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus, a group of us that get together, and it's a group that's existed since 2016 before I got into office. And I think we're the only state whose similar caucus has no Republican members. So we keep asking, please come talk to us. What do we want to do? Our Senate Majority Leader has agreed to give us a hearing on one of my bills, a package for red flag laws. He agreed to that 2.5 years ago. It didn't happen. He said that he's going to do it again. I don't put a lot of weight in it, but we have to hold his feet to the fire, right? I mean, because we need a hearing on something.
I know you have a 10-month-old, and we're talking on a Saturday. But I really, if you have like a few more minutes, I'd love to ask about some a little bit less heavy.
Do a pivot to something that's not.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's been pretty heavy.
Yeah.
The issues talking about the threats and
Yeah, I thought this was you're a stand-up comedian, right?
Yeah. Let's lighten up.
Heavy podcast.
Sorry. You worked for Hot Wheels. Isn't it a Matchbox company, car company?
Hot Wheels and Matchbox are both owned by Mattel. Design teams are down the hall from each other, and it is fascinating. So a kid who's a Hot Wheels kid and a kid who's a Matchbox kid are totally different types of kids.
Oh.
And they're designed differently. So the way that I always describe it.
Did I just step on a major cultural toy problem?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So we do it all the time. So Matchbox kids love order. They're the types of kids who get the mat that has the cityscape on it, and they love like fire trucks and EMS, and they park them like in the parking spots, and they won't break the rules, right? Hot Wheels is loops, fire, toilets, sharks, chaos. They don't cross over. There's no crossover.
Wow. That's the current paradigm still that with those toys? Or is that when I was about to say when we were growing up, but you're much younger than me. But I remember we also, by the way, I don't know if you know about this, we had key cars. Are you familiar with these?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, of course you are. But I launched, for those who might not be, there's a little key goes in the back of the toy car, a little tiny toy car, and you squeeze the key and the car goes flying. And I launched one at my brother and cut his head open. It was bad. I was like, oh my God, surprised there's no lawsuits. But you worked in design. Like you came from a whole other world, and you can talk a lot about cars. And your husband, I think I read, I went deep. He was the editor-in-chief at one point of Jalopnik, which is all about cars, right?
Sure was.
And so you can talk all about cars. So I could talk about design forever. It's really fascinating. But I do want to ask you about EVs. You drive a Chevy Bolt. I think I beat you. I got a Chevy Volt in 2011. It's got 170,000 miles on it.
Oh, nice.
And it's my baby, and I'm going to have to let it go soon, I think. But talk to me about when will average folks, and maybe you think it's now, be able to afford an EV, even a hybrid? Because I still feel like even with a tax, it still feels like it's a little too much, $35,000, $40,000. And where are we? You've got those manufacturers in your state, maybe even in your district. You know all about cars, jobs, organized labor. When do these EVs become more ubiquitous? I've been waiting for 10 years.
Yeah, so I think we hit the tipping point, and there's a lot of researchers that I've been talking to as well who back me up on this in the next 5-10 years. So this year, I am excited that we're finally hitting the tipping point where we're getting the types of vehicles that people want. So a Volt and a Bolt, it's a small car. I love it. I think it's super fun, but it's still kind of the early adopter. It's not a pickup truck. It's not an SUV, which is a lot of the types of vehicles that people like. But now you're going to be able to get a Ford F-150 Lightning that, if the power goes out in your house, your pickup truck can be a backup generator and power your house, which is awesome.
Wow.
So,
I never thought of that. Yeah.
Very cool. And now we're going to see, once those hit the market, which is happening now, we're going to see those vehicles come onto the used car market and the price is going to come down. So next 5 years, I'm super excited about, because that's where we're going to get mass adoption, because it's the things people want. And the prices are going to be a lot more affordable.
That's really what I'm wondering about is the timeline. What about the infrastructure bill and this idea of, what's it called? Range anxiety, and now having there be actual infrastructure of plug-in stations the way there are gas stations. Like, where do you see that, and what are the obstacles?
Yeah, so Michigan's a good example. The average driver in Michigan drives less than 14 miles per day. So, most people commute to work, maybe go to the grocery store, come back. So there's sort of the disconnect between the idea that I'm going on a road trip every day from Detroit, like way up into the Upper Peninsula, versus kind of my daily driving. So for most people, it's going to be like charging your cell phone. You come home, you plug it in, whenever you're not using it, you're good to go again. But we do need that public charging infrastructure. I think it's going to be less like the gas station model, but more you're going to be able to charge at home and charge at work. And then we're going to need, probably the fast chargers in the middle for your ability to go on that road trip when you do need to go on it. So that's been something that I'm working on, is how do we have the right infrastructure in the right places? How do we make sure we're incentivizing or encouraging like owners of apartment buildings to put chargers in? So if I don't own a garage, I still have a charger, and that's ticking up as well. And we have the infrastructure bill on the federal level that has a bunch of money for chargers in it too. So that's going to be great for all of us to help get those out there.
I could talk to you for hours. I have a million more questions. There's so much that you can talk about. I hope we can talk again. But final question, you wrote an interesting piece for Crane's Detroit. Did you write this? Yeah. Right. It's titled McMorrow and Wirt, your husband's last name, Wirt. Raising kids or having a career doesn't have to be a binary choice for women. Here's how to change that. You're really the perfect person to ask this to. You obviously have thought a lot about it. You're living it. Like we said, you had a baby under a year ago during the pandemic. Talk that story for another time. But the idea is now that a lot of people think about, well, we can't even afford to have another kid because preschool is more than our mortgage. Forget about people living at even the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. You're in a unique place to talk about the policies that can make it easier for families to say, we can do this, we can afford this, we can have a decent standard. And then also, how do you have it all? That's the question that women have been arguing about and being told what to think for generations, because, it's either stay at home mom or go to work all the time, or some kind of you can have it all. And it's just kind of a stupid phrase, have it all. But
I know. Yeah, I do. I appreciate the pushback on sort of the lean in mentality for women, which is just like insert yourself and do it all the time. But women are like, I'm burned out. I can't do mom 100% of the time.
No,
and
not everybody can do that.
Like, you can't. So childcare is a unique space that the market isn't going to solve. And the reason is most of the people who need childcare, paid childcare, are middle class versus the folks that are higher income, either have a nanny, aren't working, all that kind of stuff. So you're not going to get this place where people are willing to pay more for their service because they can't. Like there's a finite kind of group of people who are the customers. And the fact that we have childcare providers who can't afford childcare themselves, it's an issue. So in government, we incentivize a lot of things. Elon Musk and his companies have received billions of dollars in tax incentives, investment for Tesla, SpaceX. I'm not arguing that those aren't good things, but it's a choice that we make as policymakers. And I think we need to incentivize and invest in childcare as well, because otherwise it's never going to work. And if we do, you unlock potentially millions of qualified, passionate women to be able to come back to work, especially right now, because even women who are working or have been in the workforce have just decided it's too chaotic right now because I never know when my kid's school is going to close again, if there's an outbreak or a school shooting or, any of these kinds of things. So people are just choosing to stay home because it's impossible. So that's my hope, is that we change the conversation that childcare is economic development. If we want to grow the economy, we've got to pay for childcare for everybody.
I wonder if you've thought about this, but as you're talking, and I promise I'll let you go, it was like, I'm always trying to think about how to convince people of a policy argument. And we're so divided and the conversation becomes so short, but it's like, it truly is. If you're anti-immigrant or even, let's say, white supremacist, like a real racist, like you want this policy because white middle class, upper middle class people aren't having kids because they can't afford them. And so if you're a conservative and anti-immigrant, it's not stopping people, immigrants or necessarily as much from having kids, much less people that don't have as much money, because people have kids. But like when people are thinking about it, it's the white people. I wonder if there's any truth to the demographics of if you encourage this policy of child care, you're going to have more people that you identify with.
And, you just look at the census data. This is the first time in U.S. history that the white population is declining and minority groups are growing in population. Yeah. And I think that's scaring a lot of people. I think it's exciting because I like meeting people who are different than me. And I think we're a melting pot and that's a good thing. But you are exactly right. I talk to people who say, some of my colleagues are like, why is the birth rate so low? Why aren't women having kids? They can't afford it. Women want to go to work, which is something, Republicans always promote is, you have to get a job, you have to go to work. Women want to go to work, but they can't do both. So they're just choosing one or the other. And that was the whole point of my article. The choice is being made, and we need to make it so your choice can be both.
Yeah, you could get a college degree and you could be making $80,000, $100,000. But if you're paying $20,000 or $30,000 for childcare, you're not making that much. It's not worth it.
I ran into a woman down the street who's got 2 kids, and it was right after I came back to work. I was pushing, my baby in a stroller, and she stopped me to say, number one, I just appreciate you being really candid about taking leave and what that was like and kind of the pushback you got. But also she was like, I kept my job solely because I needed the healthcare. Because by the time I was paying for 2 kids to be in daycare, I made nothing. It was a net even. I broke even. So I was effectively paying for the privilege to go to work. Yeah. Which when you think about it, now, I'm paying to go to work, not getting paid, so they can have healthcare. What are we doing?
That's another great point about the healthcare thing. Yes, that's a great point. And by the way, why I in the end didn't run for office, because I had lost the corporate gig that I'd had for 15 years, which was awesome, and had great health insurance. And my wife, I kept talking about running for office for 3 weeks. My wife finally takes me aside and goes, we don't have health insurance if you run for office. You can't. We won't have health, And luckily, on the individual market, because of Obamacare, it's subsidized and we can afford it now, as we build our businesses. But you can't make so many choices. And I'm a man who is super successful, and I couldn't run for office, this dude right here, because we didn't have health insurance. It was a realistic concern, and it prevented me, who is way more qualified than others. But anyway,
a lot of people, anytime somebody tells me they're not qualified to run for office, I'm like, just come to my workplace for one day. Just come. Just see it.
Yeah, seriously. Well, Mondaire Jones won. So in the end, we're okay. I love talking to you. I'm super impressed with your work, and I can't imagine whatever the future holds is going to be amazing. And I'm so glad that you're on the job there in the 13th district. Great to talk to you. I'll plug everything, all your work, and please come back and talk to us again, or maybe even join one of our live events to take questions. I'll keep promoting the great work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it.
All right. How about that? Mallory McMorrow, Senator Mallory McMorrow. Definitely follow her on Twitter. Let her know that you heard her on the show. This is her first time on the show, and she does a lot of media, but a lot of it's local stuff and YouTube stuff. So I'm really psyched to get her on this podcast. I hope other people will have her on their shows and talk to her and get to know her, because she's definitely going places in Michigan. And she's really influential and effective there. So check her out on Twitter. Please let her know that you heard her on the show, as well as Laura Coates. Get her book, Just Pursuit, and get yourself or somebody in your family an electric toothbrush. Get quip.com/standup right now for all of the information on the show, the guests, me, our hangouts, the community, and of course all of the sponsors and everything else. Go to the show notes for each and every show, and please write a review on Apple Podcasts. That makes a huge difference. And lastly, it is a free program, but it's not cheap. I really need your support, so please consider signing up for a paid subscription and join the journey along with us and be a part of our community if you'd like. Or you could just support the show. It's up to you. Happy to have you either way. All right. One of our favorite community members, John Carroll, is a Grammy Award-winning singer and songwriter and a super cool, really smart guy. And he wrote this song inspired by our work in this community, and we're very happy to have him singing us out each day. Take it away, Johnny.
There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand.